The early morning mist in Pinehurst Valley clung to the earth like breath held too long. The silence broke not with birdsong, but with static. "We've found something," a rescuer's voice crackled through the radio, taut with urgency. As golden rays pierced the dense Colorado pines, the search team stumbled into a small clearing and froze. They're curled tight like a sentinel, carved from earth, and grief lay a battered German shepherd. Blood matted his coat, dirt streaked his flanks, and where one eye should have been, a jagged scar gaped. His remaining amber eye, fierce, unblinking, locked onto them. It didn't matter that he trembled, ribs rising in shallow rhythm. The growl came anyway, low and guttural, his body a barricade between the rescuers and something unseen. Captain Reynolds crouched, voice soft. "Easy now." Only then did they see it. A small hand, pale and unmoving, protruding from beneath the dog's chest. Silence cracked. Dear God. It's the Wilson boy. The dog did not move. Even as humans circled with blankets and stretchers, even as voices wavered between protocol and panic, the dog remained a soldier at post. His scarred frame, half-starved, radiated purpose. This was not a stray. Not truly. He had a name once, Shadow. His story was not whispered over firewood or buried in government files. It lived in his stance, in the controlled flick of his ears, in the way he braced for sudden movement. Shadow had once worn a military vest. He had followed commands, barked in desert winds, learned to smell out bombs. Body's betrayal. But something had gone wrong. Something that took his eye, his handler, his mission, and left only instinct behind. And now, here he was in the forested ribs of Colorado, guarding a boy like he was the last line between death and salvation. As searchers inched closer, Shadow did not growl again. He simply watched, amber, eye blazing. His body could barely hold itself up, but it held the child. The boy was alive because of him, and before anyone touched a hair on that child's head, they would have to answer to the one-eyed ghost of a soldier who had not forgotten how to protect. Target word count 345 words to complete. Part 1. Discovery total 745 words. Later, after the boy had been gently lifted onto a stretcher, after the dog had finally collapsed, with a soft grunt, they would call it a miracle. But for now they just stared. Shadow's body twitched involuntarily, legs buckling, as though the moment he saw the boy safe, his mission gave him permission to fall. Yet even collapsed in the mud, he lifted his head, his one eye trained on the boy's chest, as it rose and fell barely, but enough. A medic crouched beside the boy and peeled back the edge of Shadow's flank. "He's been curled around the kid all night. Kept him warm through the storm." Another whispered, "Look at the scarring. That eye. That's not from a street fight. This dog's seen combat." But Shadow wasn't listening. He was drifting between memory and now between exhaustion and vigilance. In the darkness of his fading thoughts, he heard a voice. "Find them, Shadow. Bring them home." It was his handler's voice, echoing from another life, a life that had ended in dust and fire, and shouting that never stopped. He remembered the explosion, the chaos, the leash torn from his vest, the scent of blood his handlers drenched into the sand, and then cages, fights, hunger, screaming men with bets in their fists, a missing eye, an escape through fields he didn't recognize. 3 years of hiding, until now, until this child. The boy stirred on the stretcher, his lips dry, his eyes fluttering. "Mom," he murmured. A medic leaned in, gave him oxygen, reassured him. But it was the absence of warmth that caused Ethan to twist, panic flashing in his eyes. "Where's the dog?" he rasped. "My dog." Shadow lifted his head again. No one needed to tell the rescuers then this was no coincidence. This was no accident. This was a bond forged not by ownership, but by choice. One wounded soul guarding another, and somewhere deep in his chest, Shadow understood. He had brought someone home, hours before the clearing, before the storm, before the world shrank into fog and bark and blood. There was only the festival. Pinerest's Autumn Harvest Festival wrapped the town square in cinnamon air and laughter. Hay bales turned into forts pumpkins balanced like trophies on doorsteps, and children darted through stalls with red cheeks and sticky fingers. Among them was Ethan Wilson, 5 years old, tugging at his mother's sleeve. "Caramel apples, Mom, please." Melissa Wilson laughed softly, brushing her hand through his sandy hair. "1 apple, but only if you promise to eat real food first." She was tired more than she'd admit, but today she gave herself permission to forget about bills, emergency surgeries, and custody schedules. Just for a little while. Ethan ran ahead, collecting maple leaves and acorns in the small canvas bag his father had given him on their last camping trip. Melissa watched him, her heart aching with something nameless love and fear woven into the same thread. He was so small, so breakable, and yet so alive. Then the phone call came. Dr. Wilson, a breathless voice, "Amy from the clinic. The shepherd mix from yesterday, he's seizing. Dr. Thompson's out of town." Melissa's chest tightened. She glanced at Ethan, who had already sensed it. The shift, the way joy dimmed in her eyes. "I have to go, sweetheart," she said, kneeling to meet him eye to eye. "Just for a little while. Mrs. Bennett and Katie are here. Can you stay with them?" Ethan nodded, but the weight of disappointment was visible in his shoulders. "Will you be back for the pie contest?" "I promise I'll try," she said, and they both knew what that meant. She kissed his forehead, whispered, "Thank you," and left. But 30 minutes later, when Melissa texted Linda Bennett to check on Ethan, the reply froze her. "I thought he was with you." Ethan had not meant to wander far, but 20 minutes standing beside Katie and her giggling friends felt like hours when no one talked to him. Then, like a thread, tugging gently from the edges of his boredom, a monarch butterfly appeared. Orange wings pulsed in the sunlight, delicate, hypnotic. It fluttered past the vendor tents, and Ethan followed, telling himself he'd be right back. Just for a moment. One butterfly led to another, and another, until the laughter and music behind him softened to murmurs, then to nothing at all. The trees beyond the festival loomed taller, wilder. Pine needles blanketed the ground like a forgotten carpet, and the air grew cooler. Ethan paused under a birch, turned around, and realized he didn't know which direction he'd come from. "Mom," he called the word small and hollow in the shifting silence. No reply. A flicker of fear. Then another. He walked faster, then ran each direction, only adding to his confusion. And then the first drop of rain fell. Far off, nestled deeper within the forest, a one-eyed German shepherd lifted his head. Shadow had been watching the festival from afar all morning, drawn by distant scents of meat and human warmth. But he never approached. Not in daylight. Not anymore. He had learned better. The people of Pinerest crossed the street when they saw him, and that was fine. He didn't need them. Still, something about the boy's solitary form caught his eye. The way he moved, small, unguarded, too far from the edge of town. The memory stirred unbidden, a young corporal lost in a mountain valley. The scent of panic in his breath. The echo of a handler's command in the wind. Shadow began to follow. By then, Ethan was already in trouble. He slipped on wet moss, the inhaler flying from his hand into the underbrush. His chest tightened each breath, a ragged wheeze. Rain thickened, thunder rolled in. "Help!" he cried out, voice cracking. And 50 yards away, Shadow did what no one else had the heart or training to do. He turned toward the child and ran. Shadow hesitated at the forest's edge. Rain soaked the earth, masking sound and scent, but the boy's ragged breathing cut through it like a beacon. Shadow's instincts warred within him, fight or hide, risk or retreat. Years on the run had sharpened his caution to a blade. People were unpredictable. They chained, they starved, they shouted. His empty eye socket ached with memory, but the child's wheezing grew more frantic, and something older than fear stirred in Shadow's chest. He moved slow at first, then faster, closing the distance in purposeful strides. His nose swept the underbrush in tight arcs, muscle memory guiding him. Seconds later, he found the inhaler lodged beneath wet leaves. He picked it up gently, careful not to puncture it with his teeth, and padded toward the collapsed boy. Ethan flinched when the hulking dog approached Amber Eye, locked onto his face. But then the dog knelt, not with menace, but with measured grace, and dropped the inhaler beside him. Ethan grabbed it with trembling fingers. 2 desperate puffs. His breathing eased. The boy curled under a pine body, shivering, clothes soaked, lips pale. Shadow watched him. Thunder cracked again, loud enough to rattle bones. The dog jerked, instinct telling him to flee, but he didn't. He crept closer slowly, lowering himself beside the child, pressing his warmth against the boy's trembling frame. Ethan stiffened. Then slowly his small hand reached out and clutched a patch of wet fur. "Good dog," he whispered. Shadow didn't move, didn't breathe too loud. But inside something shifted. It wasn't just instinct now. It was choice. As the storm howled and darkness thickened, the two formed a shape older than history, child and guardian, breath and heartbeat, sinking in the cold. Shadow had no orders, no leash, no name he trusted anymore, but he remembered what it felt like to matter. He would not leave this boy. Not tonight. Night fell hard. The temperature plunged, stealing warmth with every gust of wind. Ethan's teeth chattered his damp clothing, no match for the cold that slithered through the trees. Shadow remained curled beside him, body trembling, not from fear, but from effort, every muscle strained to hold the line between warmth and collapse. When Ethan's breathing slowed too much, Shadow licked his face gently, waking him. When the boy stirred, Shadow pressed in closer, anchoring him to this world by heat and heartbeat alone. They were not safe, not really. Something moved in the underbrush, too deliberate for deer, too quiet for man. Shadow rose slowly, positioning his body between the sound and the hollow beneath the fallen oak where Ethan now lay. A growl built low in his throat, not loud, but primal. A warning. Whatever lurked beyond shifted once more, then vanished into deeper woods. Shadow waited minutes longer, ears twitching, nose cataloging every movement of wind. Only when he was certain did he lie down again. Ethan stirred. "Are we sleeping here?" Shadow didn't answer, just leaned his flank against the boy's shoulder in reply. Later, as exhaustion crept into Ethan's limbs again, he murmured, "I wish you could talk. I'd ask your name." Shadow remained still, one eye always facing outward, guarding, listening. When the boy drifted too far into sleep, Shadow nudged him again, refusing to let him slip away. He remembered Afghanistan, the explosions, the chaos, the sand soaked with his handler's blood. Then the cages, the chains, the fights, the screaming, the day he refused to attack another dog and lost his eye for it. But through it all, he had never forgotten his purpose. Protect the innocent, stay with them, bring them home. Ethan whimpered in his sleep. Shadow licked his cheek again. The boy's small hand curled unconsciously into the dog's damp fur. And somewhere between past and present, pain and redemption, the soldier and the child slept, two survivors, braving the cold together. One night, one choice, and neither of them would ever be the same. The storm had gutted the festival. Tents flapped empty in the wind, tables overturned, pies abandoned. Flashing lights painted streaks of red and blue across the soaked ground as emergency vehicles rolled in. Melissa Wilson stood in the center. Her clothes drenched her voice raw from shouting Ethan's name. Fear gnawed at her rationality, even as her medical training tried to calculate odds she refused to accept. "He's been missing over 3 hours," she told Sheriff Parker, her voice cracking. "He doesn't have his emergency inhaler. I found it in my purse. He forgot it this morning." The sheriff nodded grimly and spoke into his radio. Rangers, volunteers, K-9 teams. Everyone moved, and James Wilson, Father Ranger, and man who once mapped these woods by compass and memory, arrived just in time to hear the worst. "Melissa, where is he?" Their shared panic said everything. "I'm going with the teams," James declared, already checking his gear. "So am I," Melissa said, daring anyone to argue. No one did. The festival had become a ghost town, its laughter replaced by shouts and protocol. Across the forest, shadows stirred from half-sleep. Ethan's breathing had stabilized with the inhaler, but his body was failing in other ways. Cold seeping through his bones, muscles weakening. The boy couldn't walk far now, even if led. Shadow nudged him gently, encouraging movement. But after a few unsteady steps, Ethan collapsed again, whispering, "I'm too tired." Shadow scanned the woods. The wind shifted. Rain slowed. He needed shelter. Guided by instinct, he led Ethan to a hollow beneath a fallen oak, dry enough covered by roots and bark. The boy curled into it, small hands, still gripping fur like a tether to safety. "You're like Sergeant," Ethan mumbled. "My dad's friend's dog from the army. He saved people too." Shadow tilted his head at the word. Sergeant. A memory. A command. He kept watch, ears twitching, nose flaring, body rigid. And miles away, strangers combed the forest. But only one was closing in with purpose. Agent Miller. And he wasn't just looking for the boy. At the search headquarters hastily set up in Pinerest's town hall, maps sprawled across tables like battle plans. Volunteers moved in tense silence, their eyes hollowed by dread. Melissa clutched Ethan's spare inhaler, ignoring offers of food or rest. James directed rangers with practiced urgency, using every inch of his knowledge of the terrain. "He's 5, James reminded the teams. He couldn't have gone far. 2, maybe 3 miles max, even before the storm hit. Sheriff Parker returned, accompanied by a tall man in a dark jacket. "This is Agent Miller, Department of Agriculture Wildlife Division. He's offering support." James blinked. "Wildlife Division." Miller's voice was smooth. "We have infrared tech. I was already in the area tracking a predator." Melissa's eyes narrowed. "What kind of predator?" "Possibly a wolf," Miller replied, "though some sightings suggest a large dog." "Livestock attacks. Neighboring counties." James frowned. "There haven't been wolves here in decades. Hence my interest," Miller said with a polite, tight smile. Outside, the K-9 unit arrived. Dogs barked as handlers retrieved Ethan's clothes for scenting. The bloodhound picked up a trail near the festival's edge, just where James had predicted. Teams reassembled quickly, armed with lights and emergency kits, disappearing into the storm-scoured forest. Miller hung back, eyes flicking toward the northwest quadrant. Rocky, steep, unlikely for a child. "Why focus there?" James asked. "That terrain's punishing." "Just being thorough," Miller said flatly. James didn't believe him. Miles away, Shadow remained motionless, except for his ears. Twice during the night, he'd growled warnings at encroaching predators. His own body cried for rest. He hadn't eaten in 2 days, but he refused to sleep. Ethan's warmth had faded, his breathing shallow. The boy murmured now and then, half conscious. At first light, Shadow heard them barking dogs, human voices cutting through trees. Help was coming, but help came with men. And men came with pain. Shadow's body tensed. The last time uniforms came, they took everything from him. But the boy beside him needed more than memory. He needed medicine. He needed people. Shadow nudged Ethan softly, preparing to make a final decision. Dawn spilled pale light through the thinning clouds. Shadow rose on stiff legs joints, protesting with every motion. Ethan lay curled against the tree roots, lips tinged blue, his fingers weakly clutching the now empty inhaler. Shadow nosed him awake, nudging his collar. The boy blinked, dazed. "Morning," he rasped. Shadow looked toward the distant search sounds, then back at the child. They wouldn't make it far on foot, so he knelt. With effort, Ethan understood his tiny hands gripped Shadow's thick fur as he hauled himself onto the shepherd's back, limbs trembling. "Okay," he whispered, barely audible. "Let's go." Step by step, Shadow carried him toward the voices. His body screamed in pain. Every muscle, every old wound burned. But the dog kept going higher up the ridge where the trees thinned and the light reached. A clearing waited at the top, dry open, visible from below. Shadow reached it and gently knelt, letting Ethan slide to the ground. The boy curled up, breathing shallow but conscious. Shadow lay beside him again, but kept his head high, scanning the forest edge. Down below, the canine handlers called out. "They've got scent, fresh trail." James surged forward, his heart pounding. 15 years of guiding hikers couldn't prepare him for this. Melissa followed close behind her, boots sinking into mud, hope clashing with terror. At the ridgetop, Shadow heard them first. He nudged Ethan, helping him sit upright, positioning his small frame where the searchers could see. Then he stood beside the boy, tall, alert, protective. James crested the ridge, froze. There was Ethan, and next to him, a one-eyed German shepherd, standing guard like a statue carved from loyalty and war. "Ethan," James whispered. The boy lit up, exhaustion melting beneath relief. "Dad, I found a dog, or he found me." Shadow didn't move. James stepped slowly, hands low. "Easy, boy. I'm here for my son." The shepherd watched him, assessed him. Scent, voice, stance. Then, after a beat, allowed the approach. Melissa arrived, tears spilling. She rushed forward, stopping just short of the dog. "It's okay, Mom," Ethan called. "This is my dog. He saved me." And the name came easy. His name's Shadow. Melissa stood frozen breath, hitching at the sight. Her son, bruised, pale, but alive. And the dog, battered and immense, standing between Ethan and the world like a loyal specter. "He saved me," Ethan repeated, voice stronger now. "He stayed with me all night. Kept me warm." Shadow's one eye tracked every movement, searchers, medics, even the mother he now allowed near. Sheriff Parker signaled the medical team forward, but none approached without caution. The canine handlers held their search dogs back, sensing the delicate balance in the air. Melissa crouched. "Ethan, honey, are you hurt? Can you breathe?" "I'm okay, just cold and tired." He patted the shepherd's side. Shadow helped me use my inhaler. James watched, eyes narrowing with recognition. "Shadow," he murmured. He followed like a shadow at first. Ethan nodded, unaware that he had spoken the dog's true name. The medics moved in, carefully wrapped Ethan in blankets. But when they tried to lift him onto a stretcher, the boy clung to the dog's fur. "He has to come to. He's hurt. He needs help." Shadow stood, rigid, reluctant. James studied him closer. Scars, signs of malnourishment, yet a discipline in his posture. No stray ever learned. Melissa met James's eyes. "Sarah said there were sightings of a one-eyed shepherd. She thinks this dog might be military." James nodded slowly. "He's trained. Look at how he holds himself." Ethan wouldn't let go. "We'll bring him," James said. "He saved your life, buddy. We won't leave him behind." That simple promise seemed to reach Shadow. He didn't retreat when the team lifted Ethan onto the stretcher. He followed, limping, but not leaving. They descended the ridge slowly. No one noticed Agent Miller watching from afar, his hand tight around a satellite phone. "Target acquired," he whispered, proceeding with extraction plan. But for now, the boy and the dog were safe. Shadow never left Ethan's side, not as they emerged from the forest to cheering crowds, not as the news spread across Pinarest like firelight, not even as the ambulance doors closed. Only then did Shadow pause, and Melissa knelt beside him. "He needs you. Come, we'll take care of you too." And Shadow Guardian Ghost Soldier stepped forward. Pinarest Community Hospital buzzed with life. Inside the pediatric ward, doctors hovered, monitors beeped, IVs dripped. Ethan's swaddled-in warmth drifted between sleep and alertness. But one question kept pulling him back. "Where's Shadow? Is he okay?" Melissa sat beside him, brushing damp hair from his forehead. "He's with Dr. Thompson, sweetheart. She's the best vet in Colorado. He's in good hands." Across town, at Pinarest Animal Clinic, Shadow stood silent under the fluorescents, wary but compliant. Sarah Thompson moved carefully, reading the stiffness in his frame, the hesitance in his posture. He bore every examination without resistance. No growling, no fear, only watchfulness. "You're not just trained," she murmured. "You're elite." Old scars wrapped his limbs like a brutal biography. Malnourished, underweight, signs of past infection around his missing eye. But the posture, the precision. Sarah pulled up the military veterinary database. There he was, Shadow Multipurpose Canine. U.S. Army Special Forces. Presumed dead in action, Kandahar, 3 years ago. Last handler staff, Sergeant Michael Reeves. In the photo, he had both eyes, alert, proud, standing beside a man with dust on his boots and loyalty in his smile. She picked up her phone and called James. At the hospital, James had just spoken with Ethan's doctors. He would recover. Hypothermia, dehydration, early pneumonia, but not fatal. Not anymore. Sarah's voice trembled. "James." "The dog. He's military." "Confirmed." "Shadow." "He went MIA during a classified op." James exhaled. That explains everything. And it explained nothing. Back at the clinic, Shadow shifted as if sensing something. Moments later, the door opened again. "Sheriff Parker and Agent Miller. I need to take that dog into federal custody," Miller said without greeting. "Potential disease vector. Protocol." James arrived just in time to hear it. "No," he said simply. "Not until we know who you really are." The air thickened. Shadow, still lying on the exam table, rose. Not aggressive, but alert. And this time, he wasn't alone. Agent Miller's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I'm invoking federal authority. That dog is a risk." Sarah stepped forward. "He shows no signs of illness, no aggression. And now we know who he is. He's a decorated service dog. His name is Shadow." Miller's tone sharpened. "That's exactly why he's valuable. Government property, recoverable asset." "You mean asset to who?" James asked, eyes narrowing. "The Wildlife Division doesn't handle retrievals of military dogs." I called. Silence. "You're not with agriculture, are you?" Miller didn't flinch, but his hand drifted near his jacket. Shadow's posture shifted. Then Melissa burst through the door. "Ethan's asking for Shadow. He's agitated. His breathing's shallow. The doctors are worried." James stepped between Miller and the dog. "He's going to the hospital." "Absolutely not," Miller snapped. "He saved my son," James replied coldly. "You can explain your protocols later. For now, we're getting this dog to the one place he's needed most." Tension coiled until the door opened again. A tall man in a dress uniform entered. "Colonel David Weber," he said calmly, voice like gravel and steel. "I believe there's been a jurisdictional error." Miller stiffened. "Sir, stand down," Weber said. Shadow is officially listed as MIA, not decommissioned. But today he fulfilled the highest duty of any service animal. He saved a life, and by my authority, he remains under protection, not seizure. Shadow's eye flicked to the colonel. His tail gave a hesitant wag. Weber stepped forward, kneeling. "Hello, soldier. You did good." Later at the hospital, Ethan stirred from sleep just as Shadow padded into the room. "Shadow," he cried, face lighting up like sunrise. The dog approached the bed slowly, then placed his head beside Ethan's hand. The boy stroked his fur, whispering, "I knew you'd come." James stood at the doorway, arms folded. Melissa beside him smiled through quiet tears. Outside, the storm had passed. Inside, something stronger had taken root. A bond born not of command or leash, but of choice pain and survival. Shadow had come home, and this time, no one would take him away.